Honey, I blew up the business.
Welcome to the podcast. Carl, great to have you here and lovely to see you.
Thank you. Likewise. Great. It's been too long, Dan, actually. But lovely to see you, mate. Lovely to see you.
It has been too long. And do you know what? I, for everyone's benefit, I do know Carl. I've known him for a number of years. And he's a great, fun guy. And I always have a great conversation with him. So I'm really looking forward to today. And partly what's prompted today is as I was reading the book, Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan, who was our first a guest on the podcast, Carl came up in it. He is a solitary tale in the Who Not How book.
I am.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump straight in, actually. I mean, by the way, bit of a quick bio. Carl is a very well-seasoned entrepreneur. He runs a business that's on its way to become £1 billion business, I believe. That's the plan.
That's the idea, yeah. So we started off with £0, and we're en route. We've still got some work to do yet, but that's the intention over the course of the next decade. But at the moment, we are a nine park holiday park business, somewhere around 1,500 colleagues in this estate. So there's plenty going on. It keeps you busy, that's for sure.
Yeah, his company's called Away Resorts. So check it out. It looks a fantastic business, actually. And I've been looking at it going, I want a holiday, so I might give you a nudge.
Let's make this podcast work and then you can have one after.
Yeah, right, okay. I'll be on my best behaviour now. So Carl is really running a fantastic business. But I want to just ask you, because there's this little story in the Who Not How book. Can you just tell us about the time that you learned to code?
Yeah, so we'd started Away Resorts, and literally you are resourceless on day one. You've just got a telephone, your old clunky laptop, and we got moving, and we needed a website because websites were, believe it or not, starting to become quite a key feature. And actually at that time, which is now 13 years ago, we were starting to see online bookings as a big trend that was forming. So I wanted to create a website that was capable of doing that. And it was sort of proceeding, when you get now you can go on to all sorts of websites and actually just easily generate your own website, and it's multi-browser friendly and all this sort of stuff. It's kind of before that was happening. And we just couldn't afford someone to build us a website. And so I tried to build it in the best sort of WYSIWYG program you could get. Didn't work. So I read 2 books on HTML coding, cascading style sheets, thought I was a guru. And just burned my soul. I realized that coders are a real special breed of people that can just stare at screens for days and days and days and then find little glitches and little lumps and bumps. But I taught myself CSS, HTML5, programmed the first site. I've got to tell you, Dan, it was awful. It was really bad. Visually was awful. I then taught myself how to do all the graphics so I could create the buttons, the imagery, put all that together. Found an online host. Then I got hacked and the website blew up. And I was just shockingly bad. It did, and I tell you, that's the first mistake. What I did was spent 3 or 4 months trying to do this, working a day job and then a night job. So I was doing 18-hour days and absolutely burned myself out completely trying to discover a skill set that I just was not adept at doing.
So this was 2008, was it?
That's right, yeah, right at the beginning of it all, yeah.
Right, so 2008, you set up a business. It's a very physical business, really. It's a physical estate of holiday parks and people and buildings and properties. You're kind of getting lost in the virtual world.
I know. Because classically entrepreneurially, you are attracted to bright, shiny new buttons and new knowledge and new information. And sometimes you forget the things that make you special, that make you good. So what you end up doing is being attracted to a new bit of information and then lose sight of the whole business that surrounds you, that made you good, that got you there, just because it's a new piece of knowledge. And that's what I found myself doing, Dan. I was attracted to the wrong stuff, really.
So you're sort of sat there staring at a screen, trying to kind of get your cascading style sheets to work on Internet Explorer, whatever it was.
Firefox, all that stuff. Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I'm going to do it, and you're kind of like, you're going to prove the point. But it just not only did it like not work and look bad and then get hacked. I mean, what a nightmare. And it burnt you out. So hang on. So how did that make you feel then when you were kind of like in the thick of all that? And you've got a startup as well at the same time. So it's all kind of happening. How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, and you've got parallel investors. So you've got your other colleagues that have gone on the journey with you. You think you're trying to do the right thing by them. They're just seeing you coming into work looking white because you've lived under the stairs all night, eating buckets of fish heads, whatever coders eat at night. And I ended up burning three or 4 months of time for the sake of, and what I ended up doing was going down the road, and there was a local web developer, and I knocked on his door, said, could you build me this website? And he went, yeah, it'd be about £1,200. And I realized I'd just given up 3 or 4 months. I thought they were going to be hundreds of thousands. And he developed this for me real quickly, 1,200 quid, got it done. And actually, I just felt like a bit of a plum, to be honest. I just walked back in the office and felt like I'd let the side down a bit, because I could have actually had that done in week 1. And then I could have been back operating the business instead of being lost in the melee. And then I think you get this notion of entrepreneurs are often quite competitive, so they don't want to be beaten by this problem. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy that I won't be beaten, I'll be better. And then you look at your colleagues and you go, do you know what? I should have just done better than that. And so big lesson 1 is stick to what you're good at. Let someone else do the other things for you. Pay for that knowledge, pay for that skill set, and you'll have a lot less stress in your life, and you'll feel a lot more like you're not just spoiling the investment opportunity for other people around you, really.
So there's this responsibility, not just to yourself, but obviously to everybody else around you.
Yeah, I hadn't given rise to that, I suppose, at the time. I sort of took on this title of CEO on a little startup and felt all, special and noble. And in reality, I think it's almost a selfish action. And,
Really?
and the result of that has been 13 years of collaboration and being honest and asking others around me, do you think I should go down this route? Do you think this is a good use of my time? Where do you think I should apply myself better? Because of that horrific experience of, 18-hour days for 3 or 4 months, and then discovering it's a drop in the ocean from a cash perspective and an effort perspective for someone else. So yeah, for me, the big learning was just collaborate, ask questions, and trust your colleagues to understand who you are.
It's interesting. It's getting those guide rails almost for yourself. Like you say, you see a shiny thing as an entrepreneur, you want to chase it, and then again, it's interesting. The ego kicks in, and it's like, I can beat this.
Yeah,
I can do that.
It does, and you also get lost in the excitement of the new proposition, and so my CFO, as he is now, finance director back in those days, I lovingly refer to him as the Vulcan. It's just about logic. It's not an emotional decision, right? And he always says this question to me: that's all great, but how are you going to turn that into a commercial return? And when you start with that in your head, when you get your bright, shiny button moment, and then you know that someone, some point, either your bank manager, your investor, or your colleagues are going to ask you, how do you monetize that? That's the start point. And it shut down so many projects that I would have just got lost in and just been excited by, but delivered no value.
So looking back at that, then you've had this burnout experience. So what do you think you learned from that? Those 3 or 4 months seem to that you say it's pretty imprinted on you.
It's a big piece, actually. I can remember, I'd say the worst moment from a burnout perspective, I can remember saying to my colleague, do you ever wish you had an accident so you could be hospitalized and just have someone look after you, but have a great excuse for not being at work other than I'm tired and I'm burnt out?
Wow.
And when you get to that moment, when you get to the reality of that's almost selflessness. It's where you have gone so far over the edge of trying to do the right thing by everybody that you've forgotten the most important person in the whole equation, which is yourself, and keeping yourself healthy, living a healthy lifestyle. Don't get me wrong, I'm not sort of born again health freak, but I choose to live a a life that is much more about me and making sure that I get the rewards. Because in the end, entrepreneurialism isn't about Instagram recognition, isn't about social media recognition. It's about you and what you get out of it. And I was getting nothing out of it other than just feeling tired and having this giant sense of moral requirement to do certain things. And it's not bad just to sit there and go, do you know what? I need some time now. I need some time for me. I want to get something out of this. And I'm really disciplined about that now, Dan. Really disciplined about it has to work for me. It doesn't work for me, I'm doing something wrong.
Mm. So you say you have this sort of moral requirement to do certain things. What did you see as the moral requirement?
Well, I think, the way our business formed, I took two of my colleagues into a little kitchen in our office where we were working at the time as a group. And I said to them, look, we can have a go at this. Why don't we go and have a go at this? We're good people. We know what we're doing. We can do this. And they gave up really well paid equity bearing shareholder jobs to come on this journey. I couldn't very well then walk away from that and just go, I'm a bit tired this week. I just felt this giant sense of responsibility. I got a guy who's got both of my colleagues actually got two kids, young kids at the time, and had given up well-paid jobs. And I felt a real sense of duty to them. And it wasn't until 7 years later when we had a successful exit, our first successful change of investors, that I felt my job was done. My responsibility to them was over. Now it was about me. But I didn't realize until that clicked off, I didn't realize how heavy that was bearing on my soul. Just that sense of moral duty to people. And actually, the watch out with that is they made their own choices. So don't hold yourself accountable and responsible for other people's actions, even though you may have encouraged it. Be fair and true to yourself. You just asked a person if they wanted to do something. They said yes. But I had this giant sense of remorse and guilt. It had to work. It had to work, It was a good spur, but a good motivator. But at the time, looking back now, it was tough. It was tough on me.
Yeah, it's a real line to walk, that, because there's a paradoxical set of truths here. One is that for your startup or business to work, you have to put this kind of almost unreasonable amount of effort and energy into it to get it going. But at the same time, you can put too much of yourself in there and just fry yourself.
Yeah, I think, I have similar feelings now. I mean, we've got 1,500 people, and I worry about those 1,500 people every day. I wake up every morning and concern myself with all sorts of questions. What percentage of our team are living on food banks? And is that right? And should we be doing better to support them? And I don't know enough of that information yet. But it is a paradox because you generate something that you think is then about you, and then it brings with it a whole new set of other fears, other concerns. And entrepreneurs often have this notion of, I don't want to work for anybody. But you're always working for someone. It's often just your internal sense of duty. And so I have a duty to my colleagues that are helping my customers have a successful experience on holiday. And so I have a duty to look after them now. And so I'm working for them in many ways. It's this complete notion of this inverted pyramid organization, but it's true. That's how I feel about it.
It's funny you say that, inverted pyramid, because we talk about that in my business. We call it the upside down organization chart.
Yeah.
It's the idea that you serve the people above you, but it's an upside down triangle. Because I feel that, and it's funny as you're talking, I had a proper sort of burnout experience, well, in my early 30s, and I'm late 40s now, but very much because of the same reasons. Yeah, I was putting my heart and soul into the business, and it was too much heart, too much soul.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to gauge what that is because you're caught up in the adrenaline rush and the ego rush, and it was all going pretty well actually.
Yeah.
But it was eating me up and burning me up. And so what I'm curious about is there's a couple of things here. Just like you seem to me that you put a lot of your own heart and soul. You mentioned soul into the business. Is that something that you see in yourself?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm born of a man and of a set of parents that have a huge, strong moral compass, a massive sense of duty. You have to do the right stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so And I can't do anything half baked. I just cannot do anything half baked. It's not in my DNA. So therefore, I just really apply myself to everything that I do to the extent that I can. And it's also recognizing the bits that you're not good at and stepping away from those. And I wasn't brave enough with that either early doors. So, but yeah, I pour myself into it. I think the one strange thing at the moment is knowing when to pull myself out of it, knowing when it's someone else's time to carry the mantle, when it's to take the beacon forwards or to give them smaller versions of the beacon that you've got. Do you know what I mean? And as we expand, how do you keep that sense of, Steve Jobs had it right, Apple, the world's largest startup, is keeping that kind of energy, but at the same time, not feeling the responsibility to carry all of the energy yourself, I think.
So how do you handle that?
So I think, first of all, it comes with the people you surround yourself with. And I think I have a philosophy now, which is don't recruit people like you and don't recruit people just because you like them. You've got to find people that are right fit, non-toxic, got to be able to deliver the personality and the persona of the business that you want. But they have to have complementary skill sets. They have to, I'm the guy with the crayons and the colouring in book, right? I'm the ideation person. I drive creativity in the organisation. I am not an implementer. I don't influence in that way. But I wanted to spend too much time hanging around in that implementation phase. And so providing real clarity about, I do this, you do that, recruiting to fill those roles means that in a meeting room setting, Dan, it's a really balanced session. I don't have the notion of I lead this organization. I have the notion of I am part of it, and my role within it is to answer to investors, and I have to answer. I'm at the pinnacle of the individuals that take responsibility, if you like. But there are moments when other people take the floor and they lead the business by the things that they're doing. And I take so much joy from that. And I think what comes out of it is this notion. Don't be frightened to recruit people with bigger capabilities and bigger talents than your own, but make sure that you're really disciplined on how you recruit. But don't hang on to people that aren't fitting, that aren't driving you forwards. They'll just drag you down, and it's like a millstone around your neck in the end.
So it comes back to this. I mean, the what you learn in the coding thing is just finding the right who, as perhaps Dan Sullivan would say.
Yeah.
Right people to help you do what you want to try and do. And again, this is what I'm really interested in, actually, is this sort of relationship between you, the kind of entrepreneur, and your emotions and your sense of duty, and you as an individual, and then the rest of all these 1,500 people. I mean, it's funny, on my little bit of research prior to today, I saw an interview with you, a video recently, I think in January, and you talked about pastoral care.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I remember. I know the interview you're talking about with Anne Elliott. Yeah,
that's right. But it was really interesting because I thought this is a. So in fact, you explain to our listeners today about what was behind that. This idea of pastoral care in your business.
So look, we got 1,500 people. A big proportion of those are in their late teens, early 20s. And you live life through your own lens. And if my granddad used to say to me, if you want to walk in another man's shoes, you've got to take your own shoes off. All right. So you've got to almost forget the experience that you've got when you're thinking about the challenges that are in front of you. So during the pandemic, it was becoming obvious that a number of my colleagues, I refer to they're not team members, they're colleagues that work alongside me in different roles. They were becoming really stressed and really uncomfortable and fearful. And my daughter, who's 28, would be phoning me up, crying, upset because of everything the pandemic is doing to her mentally. And I started to realize, Jesus, so many people must be feeling like this. So during the pandemic, it was my 50th birthday. So I just wrote top 10 things I've learned, put it on our internal communications platform, workplace. And I was just blown away, staggered by the response. One of the comments I put on there was, don't live your life by likes. All right. It's not about likes. It's about impact. Better to have a brilliant impact on 2 people than have a load of veneer-like clicks who don't care. Right. So I wrote that, and then I suddenly realized I am surrounded by people that need to feel a patriarchal role model in front of them that will help drive their attitude to work and their attitude to life versus make them really perfect automatons. They wear the brand and they become this kind of perfect version of what you want. And I just realized that it was about them growing and evolving. And that's how I felt about it over time. And it's just been so cathartic, Dan. It's been such a joy to start to help people mature rather than help people mature in a job role. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I know exactly what you mean. And it's funny because the experiences that brought me to set up this podcast was a way of realizing that I personally needed to mature and I personally needed to grow as a human being. And that obviously, as one grows, one's business improves because you channel yourself into your business as you've described. And I think that it made me realize actually that my team, it's the same thing. We're all humans that have this sort of potential that is often trapped. But the role of that you're in, I think, is as you're describing, this kind of pastoral care to help people become more rounded individuals as humans.
Yeah, and I think I think it's 360-degree care, though. I think there is a moment where you have to then self-educate, not self-medicate. I think you can get home as a CEO. Sometimes you can get home and the first thing you think about is the red wine, the white wine, or the beer. And actually, I've enjoyed the last year. I've become much more cognizant and conscious as a person. So we've got 1,500 people. They each get 3 bits of uniform. For example, I don't know where that uniform gets made. I don't know whose fingers sew those pieces of uniform together. Is that a Chinese sweatshop? Or are we supporting employment in the UK? I don't know where the dye goes. Does it go into the, waterfall? Or is it correctly? And we've become much more, I've become much more conscious because I've had this 360-degree pastoral care, which has to reflect on me as a person too. I have to think about how do I care for myself? Because as CEO, you know what? 99 times out of 100, no one's caring for you. You're alone with your own thoughts.
I think this is great because I was going to ask you actually, because you've been talking about pastoral care of your staff, but then it's pastoral care of yourself.
Yes.
And you've actually just introduced me to think, again, comes back to where you were with the burnout and the coding thing, is who's looking after you? How do you approach that? I mean, you talked about not drinking perhaps, but which I think is interesting. So what other sort of tactics do you have around that?
Who I hang about with, I have a very, very limited cohort of friends. I have got a group of people that I would call my acquaintances, but a very small number that I would define as friends. And we have to have an impact on each other's lives. We have to become better for having our company. It's not just a social experience. How do we evolve ourselves? So I've met some cool people on Strategic Coach, some amazing people. There's a guy called Tim McDonough who I communicate with, not overly regularly actually, but he introduced me, for example, to a program called Finding Joe, sort of about Joseph Campbell and this whole notion of finding your inner energy and what drives you, what motivates you, and that those people that bring those things to your life, those moments to your life that encourage you to think about who you are and what you wish to stand for and what your legacy will be. They are the people that provide me with pastoral care. And there's probably 4 or 5 in my life, but I engage with them so openly that sometimes scarily openly, actually. That's the other thing. I think sometimes you can lie to yourself and you've still got the inner demon. But I'm able to be really open with those guys and girls, and the consequence of it is that I feel so blessed as a result of that and so much more rounded. But that's a new phenomenon. That's literally the last 24 months in reality for me. And I'm 52. You'd have thought I'd have worked and learned a bit sooner than that, wouldn't you?
Look, listen, I think it's funny. There's a theme actually in some of these interviews I'm doing, which is you have your kind of ass handed to you repeatedly over time. And eventually the crack opens up in your thick skull and you allow yourself to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
And that's very much me, I've got to say. But what I think is interesting there is the openness, the vulnerability, the telling it as it is to yourself and to others seems to be what you're saying is what's helping you most.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've had I think, isn't it strange? People's biggest strengths are often the reflection of their weakness. So, I'm a relatively confident chap, but the reason why I'm confident is because I harbour insecurities, like many, many people do, actually. And so what I've done, the more insecure you become, the louder you sound, the more confident you appear, to a point where you don't have a foundation that can support that overconfident nature anymore. And what I've found is work on the foundation that the overconfidence stands on, disarm that, and then you can become a more calm person and a person who's more at ease with themselves, and actually recognize the symptoms and the signs of burnout or I'm becoming out of my depth now. And then that willingness to open up just means people just know who you are. They don't see you as this invincible individual that has all the answers, because no one has it. Therefore, you immediately take away that whole stress and that whole notion of responsibility, and you just be the best version of you every single day, and that's it.
Yeah, you use the word grounded, and that's the word I'm trying kind of use every day to remind myself that's what I want to try and be. I think it's interesting now because the taking off that heavy jacket of professionalism and I'm the CEO and I'm the one in charge, and it is really liberating. Well, I find it liberating.
I mean, the CEO's role, the risk is, have you ever researched the role of a CEO?
No.
I took the role. I didn't know what it actually meant. I didn't, it's a type, because the one thing you talk about your ass being handed to you, sometimes people hand you your job title and you don't really know what it means. And my dad has a phrase, which is you're always promoted to your first level of incompetence. And then suddenly you get caught out. And part of the experience of being a CEO is there isn't a school for CEOs that I knew of until only 2 weeks ago, when I've just been on a school for CEOs.
Have you?
Yeah, and it's a great experience, and it was so liberating. And I was surrounded by people all going, "Do you suffer with imposter syndrome?
Oh wow!
Do you understand why you're here? Do you get how this all happened?" And it was an incredible experience, realizing that you're not the only one that wonders how all that happened. And so when you research what the CEO's role is, it doesn't require you to be the master. It doesn't require you to know everything. It just requires you to be able to lead an organization. But you don't have to have all the best ideas in it, and you don't have to be able to be the hardest working either.
What's interesting, you've mentioned a couple of times about your sense of duty. And I relate to this because I have a sense of duty. And through things like meditation and what have you, and work on myself through my own kind of mental health travails over the years, I've got more aware of this inner voice. All right. And you talk this again, coming back to this idea of pastoral care of yourself. How have you kind of got used to the responsibility, the sense of duty, coming to terms with that in the realm of your business? How you kind of, what's that conversation like now?
So I tell you what I did. I wrote, everybody's got a business plan. Everybody's got a business mission statement, vision, all that sort of stuff, purpose, values. Have you ever done one for yourself? You ever sat down and actually wrote your personal mission, your personal values, what you are willing to accept as a human and what you're not? So where does your food come from? Where do your clothes come from? And it was this whole point of consciousness, and finding out more and being willing to be honest and say, I actually don't like this about me. So what are you doing about it? So I chose to define my own personal operating values, and I stick by them. And it's really as simple as that. And as soon as I do that, I don't have the inner voice as an argument. I have the inner voice as a debate, which is, okay, well, let's go away and look at our values together, inner voice. Let's understand what the values say about this decision. And then you can become at ease with it, because it's not a debate anymore. It's just, okay, I get your view, but this is actually the way we're going because we agreed these values together. And I know that sounds almost schizophrenic in nature, but I think that's what the reality of your brain is. It's a conscious element that is feeding you information, and not all of it is true.
100%. And that, what you just said there, is so important for people to become conscious of, because you know, have you read the book The Chimp Paradox?
I have, and I was I have an angry chimp.
Sorry about it. I've got a bleeding gorilla. And I read that and it explained everything. For people's benefits, who maybe have not read it, could you describe what the chimp is?
Yeah, so the chimp is kind of this inner animal in your mind, if you like, and it is like a chimp in that it doesn't have a clear sense of personal consciousness. It's therefore much more raw and animalistic. Therefore, it's got fright and flight and anger and it's raw. And so when your personal boundaries, the things that you think are your personal boundaries, because they are pre-programmed by your life experiences, when they're crossed, the natural reaction is for your chimp to come out and take control of your conscious brain, which is the kind of backseat driver philosophy. The person in the back of the car that's telling you how to drive, what to do, this chimp is doing that to you. And what the chimp paradox allows you to do is more understand how you manage your chimp, how you let it out in a controlled way to burn up its energy, get its food, get its sustenance that it needs, and then ease back into the dark spot in the brain that you're in better control of. I thought it was a mind-blowing read, actually. I thought it was really, really interesting. There should be a truncated version of it, though. I did find it heavy going, but it's a great read for self-awareness, for self-knowledge, definitely.
It was a pivotal book for me in my relationship with my own self, actually, my mental health. I was diagnosed with depression about 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
And part of, so I was recommended the book by a consultant psychiatrist who was kind of, I was seeing. And I got to tell you, I read that book and I was like, I know why I'm depressed. I've got a gorilla smacking me up every day.
and it is. I mean, in a similar vein, I read the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
All right.
Which is really about trying to understand the balance between mental balance, lifestyle balance, and material lifestyle and material living. And I did that I've been to Health Nucleus for a sort of a full all over body MOT. And they said, listen, you're all right, except you're living 2 lives in one go. And that's going to do it to you. You know, rich living, drink and unhealthy food and going out for dinner and all that sort of stuff and not doing enough exercise. And so The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari was in a similar vein to Chimp Paradox. That just helped me understand the balance between materialism and what really matters. And then the Chimp Paradox was, how do I control that inner voice that is the voice going, oh, go to the pub or go and have a bite to eat, go and have a meal. And so I just got a greater lifestyle balance and mental balance in terms of, how to control that really.
What's really smart is in the book Chimp Paradox, they talk about managing your chimp. Yeah. You can't wrestle a chimp. It's too strong. Yeah. You have to manage it, like throw it a banana. And what you're doing with your thing about your values, etc., is that's how you calm your chimp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It is, because it provides it context. It provides it a framework in which it needs to exist, and it can't be debated. You cannot debate some of the red lines that you draw for yourself in those values. And so I find that really liberating and really easy.
Yeah, essentially, you've almost created a structure, like I call it a playpen, in which your chimps can roam around.
Indeed. That's a good way of looking at it, actually.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I can see that because that's me. That's 100%. I've got every day I have to calm that damn thing. In fact, it leads me on. I'm going to a line in Who Not How. I'm going to zoom on now to a little different topic, but I want to talk about your artist or your inner artist. Because there was a line in Who Not How that stood out to me. Again, I relate to this. He says, I'm going to read from the book. It says, quote, even though he really wanted to be a musician and an artist,
yes,
he worked hard at becoming a manager. Now, one thing you might not know about me was I went to art school.
Okay. I
was going to be a painter, fine art painter. And I dropped out and became a man that runs a technology company. So I've been reading a book recently called The Artist's Way, which is about unblocking creativity. And she talks about your inner artist. It's a bit like your chimp or some of your relationships. Yeah. I'm just curious about your artist and this version of you and how you perhaps see how your creativity expresses itself now or through your role in the business you're in.
So I think that's a retrospective view. I didn't realize I was creative. I didn't realize I was artistic. And by creative, I mean, I'm not a Picasso that never made it. I just like the notion of creativity. And I lived in a household that was very traditional in terms of work. Go to work, learn out, get your qualifications, become a manager, and then go up the middle management and senior management. And it was a very structured, hierarchical, bureaucratic, classic approach to business. And by the way, I don't blame anybody for that. That's just someone else giving you their advice, their opinion. But you're young and impressionable. And I lost the opportunity, I think, to explore my love of music and my love of all things creative, because I didn't have people that were giving me the confidence to exploit that. So differently, my daughter is very creative. She works now in a sort of graphic design agency, and she's got way more talent than I'll ever have. But I could see it in her, and what I encouraged her to do was to go to an educational establishment that allowed that to come to life. So that's the bit that I feel as though I would like to have explored more, because I think I've got more to give, but I've never had any of the formal training to do it. But then separately, how it comes out in work now is I see things in pictures. I don't see numbers and spreadsheets or buildings. I see bright spots and dark spots, if you like, things that are going well, things that aren't so good. And then I look at problems in a creative, collaborative way, in an artistic way, rather than in a let's go and get some kind of management consultant firm to come in and interview 1,000 people. And I look at my inner self and go creatively, okay, what would I enjoy there? And so I use it like that. And invariably, most of society isn't creative and isn't innovative. And so actually, that's the bit I think the entrepreneur can bring. That's that little bit of creativity and colourful thought, if you like. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. The phrase colourful thought's great, actually, as a way of describing it. And I actually think there's a real parallel or an intrinsic link between artists and entrepreneurs.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think there is an inner restlessness with an artist. They've never done their most perfect piece of work. It's always the next one. There's always something that isn't quite perfect in it. And so I think there is that impatience to want to keep moving forwards, to keep progressing, keep improving, keep honing your knowledge, keep honing your skills. And I think there is a truth to that from a sportsman-like environment, or sports person-like environment, and equally from an artistic environment, that urge to keep getting better and better and better.
Yeah, and it's kind of the energy. You talked about energy earlier as well, and this idea of. Here's the thing I find actually is I get gripped by ideas. Yeah, so I have an idea.
Yeah,
podcast, business, something else. And I get gripped by it, and I'm like, I got to do it.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I know it's like that. I need to do it. It's not. I don't need to do it in 3 months' time. I need to do it now. I need to get it done and get the itch scratched somehow. Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, no, exactly that. I mean, I've got to do it. And my wife now is sort of just, I think, rolls her eyeballs and goes, he's off on one again.
People call it a fad, don't they? Right? Do you get people accusing you of having a fad? This is the latest thing you're into and all that stuff?
Yeah. Actually,
so let me take the pain away, right? Let me take the pain away. I got a book, and it was about being a multi-potentialite. People like us that have got this inner urgency to discover a new skill set, do something new, have got a vast array of experience. And when the experience is done, that's when our time to move on is. That's when we become ineffective at that moment, because we realize that there's another potential opportunity over here to go and have a look at. What it provides us with, though, is a giant spectrum of experience. We don't have a monocular vision. We have a very, IMAX style experience in front of us. Not all of it perfect, but it gives us vast knowledge. And that multi-potential, it is so alien to some people. They spend their entire lives belittling what it is that you're doing by saying things like, it's a fad. oh, here's your new gadget, here's your new toy. And they make you feel as though in some way that's a crime. And you need, for me, the more people say it, the more I'm doing it now, because that's who I am. That's how I am built. So that multi-potentialism versus a fad is a really important piece of terminology for me.
I'm nicking that. But here's the thing. I think here's the artistry bit. I think because artists, be it musicians or painters or whatever, they kind of take signals from the universe and they interpret that in a way that's a colourful, exciting, energetic entity. And I think that's kind of, we've started the conversation talking about your heart and soul and your emotional investment. And you've just described how you kind of create these vivid, visceral kind of visions in the business and the emotional part. And the kind of, it's not built on management consultant stuff. And I kind of, it's interesting. So okay, what's an example you would think, do you say that how you've applied that in Away Resorts?
So I wanted to improve our customer journey, end-to-end customer journey from point of booking to point of arriving back home. How do we go about doing that? First thing I did is Googled, customer journey specialists, ended up with a bunch of people that have worked on airport terminals and all this sort of stuff. They came down, they did a beautiful pitch. It was an amazing experience. Walked away, got the price, nearly fell off the chair when I understood the kind of money, the kind of sums that people are talking about. And then I sat back and thought, do you know what? I've not applied myself here. I'm a consumer as well as a business owner. And I reckon I can identify 90%, 95% of the improvements that they will recommend if I just sit back and observe that customer journey and observe what's happening and work through it myself. And that's what we did. And then what you're paying for is the 5% of cream that really turns the power on the thing that you've just created and engineered, versus paying a load of money to get someone to give you the 95% that you could have done on day one. So I apply my creativity and my creative thought in that way is, let's just go and do the max out on what we can do internally in a creative way, and then get someone to come in and just put the edge on it. Luckily, I've got that guy working in the business who's my I have a creative director, and he just brings just the cream. I can give him an embryo of an idea, and it is just brought to life in the most amazing way.
It's another excellent who to help you in your business.
Man, this guy is just on a different level. It's just, I can't get close. But he's a mad professor. I kind of have to lock him in his own laboratory and not let people in, but I can't go in myself either. I just throw ideas in his laboratory and great stuff comes out. But it's just an amazing experience to work around people that can just go and take an idea that you've had and make it even better than you ever thought it could be, without having to spend hours going through working parties and steering committees and post-it notes all over walls. And you know what I mean? They just bring it to life. And that's the joy of some of the people I work with.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been a great testament for creativity and creatives in business. Actually,
Yeah,
what you just said. I want to sort of pick up on actually is a theme around crises. And crises.
I've had a couple, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I noticed you launched Away Resorts in 2008.
I did, yeah.
And I remember, I'm old enough to remember what happened that year. So what happened there's a big financial crisis. What was that like launching?
It was horrible, Dan. It was horrible. We kind of we kicked off the business. We got some investor backers, and I don't think anybody really knew what was coming around the corner at the time, apart from a very small select handful of very clever people. And I can remember being sat in the office, seeing the queues forming outside Northern Rock, going, wow, what's happening there? It was literally that naive. It was bizarre. And then the world took a giant financial enema. And we ended up with the most overmanaged business for about 18 months because no one was willing to sell anything. Banks didn't have balance sheet transparency. There was a liquidity failure. We couldn't get, interbank borrowing was not happening. People didn't want to sell because no one knew what the price of the market was going to be. So we just sat for 18 months thinking, I've just left. This is that moment of that duty. Two guys, come on, follow me. It'll all be great. Literally 3 months later, So yeah, we had to trade through that, and that was tough. That's where you got to realize the difference between profit and cash. Big learning curve for me was this notion of one of my investors once said to me, the problem with you operators is you don't understand balance sheets. And it stung like a bitch. It was agony to hear those words, but he was right, actually. And I think one of the most important lessons I learned is don't just have a balance sheet that provides for normal day-to-day operations. Think about your balance sheet and cash at bank that provides for an emergency fund, because it's not always going to be an obvious credit crunch. We've had New Year's Eve. We had a whole park lose power on New Year's Eve. 4,500 people.
Oof.
No New Year's Eve, and you have to recover from that in certain ways. That I couldn't have predicted that. It was just an absolute. Unpredictable event. We were not expecting that to happen at all. And you need a balance sheet that will prepare for those little crises, but also some lumpy stuff like pandemics and other things.
Yeah.
So consequently, by the way, sorry, just to talk over you. Internally now, we have each of my direct reports have my colleagues that report to me directly. They have a listening post responsibility. So some of them are about supply chain. Some of them are about the banking environment. Some of them are about people, and others about competitors, customer behaviors. So we have a 360-degree listening post, and every month we have our team meetings. We sit down and we talk together about what have you heard on your listening post, and we spend more time thinking about the influencers externally, so we can be better prepared for the impacts of a pandemic, the impacts of a credit crunch, or the influences of a competitor changing shape. So our balance sheet then can be protected.
So you mentioned the pandemic there. I mean, so how has your pandemic been?
I'll tell you, it's been, and I have to try and take away a positive out of this. Otherwise, you just end up just walking around sulking about stuff you can't control, right? So the positive has been, I referenced earlier on, that kind of self-consciousness, self-awareness. I can't think of a time in my life where I've ever had a 6-month period where I was locked indoors and forced to think about nothing but the footprints I leave in life, and the things I'm doing. So the big plus for me is definitely been that, and it's allowed me to put straight some of those inner turmoil, some of that cognitive dissonance between where you are, what you're doing, versus who you really want to be. But actually taking a vibrant, energized, dynamic business that was performing really, really well and shutting the doors and mothballing it, and then one of them we had to close down completely and demolish and rebuild because it was never going to salvage itself on the right side of the pandemic, just because of the kind of business it was. And then letting go 140 colleagues that have worked there for over a decade that have done no wrong. There's a lot of navel gazing, a lot of soul searching, and a lot of regret about some of the loyalty that I couldn't pay back in certain ways. It's been tough from customer relationship at times. It's not always been an easy journey, but it's not personal. People aren't out to get you. You can only the legacy you leave will be how did you behave on the way through it. And so moral compass, inner values, business values, use those to drive your decision making, then you can sleep easy at night.
What do you think was the most difficult part of the last 12 months?
People, the impact it had on people. So as the shareholder directors, there were 8 of us, and we all gave up around 50% of our salary for 3 months, and then put that salary into a pot, which is called a Hug a Hero. Our team members are called Holiday Heroes. And it was there to call on if people were in crises and having personal difficulties. And Dan, honestly, some of the stuff that I became privy to and some of the difficulties that people live through and the challenges that they're experiencing broke my heart a bit, actually. They were really, really, really tough to read, really tough to understand what people were suffering. And it's easy to become dismissive of that, isn't it? It's easy to become glib. Well, it's all about life choices and you make your own bed and all that malarkey. But in reality, whether you make your own bed or not, it still can be uncomfortable getting in it. And so that was the hardest bit, was just watching people suffer. And then, so for me, as I say, got a shirt on my back. I've got a nice house. I'm comfortable. I've been lucky in my life, but watching other people suffer is pretty difficult.
Mm. So how did that make you feel, though? Just as you're watching all this?
Determined actually. So we're already implementing change now. So I'm much more conscious of the influence that we have on people, how we expect them to work, how we remunerate, how we compensate, how we think about it's just little things. We had a meeting set up next week, one of our exec team meetings, and I found out that one of my colleagues, it was his young son's birthday, and I just said, cancel the meeting. Why is that? I can't have that. I can't have a dad away from son and a mum away from son on their birthday at such a young age. It's so important. And therein is the problem, right? You have such a sense of duty and responsibility that you forget the things that matter. So pieces like that, Dan, I'm determined to ensure that we're a more compassionate organisation, and we're more positively impactful across local communities, team members, and the environment. We're going to be better at that.
Beautiful. I mean, there's a bit in there. Like, I remember years and years ago, and I think it was my daughter's, when she was young, for a kind of sports day thing, Yeah. And I wasn't going to go because I had a meeting. And then I think it was my father-in-law said, look, just what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah. And then, of course, it's funny, isn't it? Because at the moment, when you're in stuff's happening and it's all important.
Yeah.
But really, it's sort of froth on the coffee. Do you know? It's like, it's sort of, yes, it's good, but is it really essential?
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely right. When I look back, I can remember watching my daughter be a sheep in a nativity play for 2 hours. And it was one of those, oh, why am I here? But now I dine out on that story. There are things like that I could have easily dismissed and gone to work and done things. And I've sacrificed enough. And so actually, and I don't want other people you got to put your hard yards in, right? You've got to do the effort. It's not about being lazy, but it's about prioritizing the things that matter.
That's a really great takeaway, just, for everybody, and a good one to remind oneself repeatedly as you kind of muddling along. Well, we're coming up towards the end of our sort of podcast time, but I've got, there's so much great stuff in there, Carl. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing.
It's my pleasure.
Really, and you've got such a great business, and what I think is so fantastic is your consciousness raising thing that's happened in the last 12 months and the last 24 months, and something I think I personally have got a lot from the pandemic is that idea of stripping out what's important and thinking through the impact on the people around me, or what my impact is, on the people around me.
Even this podcast, Dan, is just, genuinely, it's not me being on it, but actually the notion of it, honey, I blew up the business. I just think it's a great podcast. But I think if I could have listened to that 10, 15 years ago and prepared myself for some of those pitfalls, brilliant. So the consciousness is the generosity of the information you're about to deploy on people. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. And do you know what? I actually, you talked about, have you got a personal mission and vision? And I do, actually. And my thing I'm aiming to try and do is to help reduce suffering.
That's a mighty mission, but I love the way you're doing it.
And increase joy.
Yeah.
Because, personally, I had a lot of self-inflicted suffering through being an entrepreneur. Was a channel for me to self-sabotage, basically. Yeah. And one of the great opportunities in life is, I think if I can have a life that's joyful, be that through music, relationships, going out for a run, whatever. That's what it's all about. I'm kind of like, you can't capture that, you can't quantify that. And so what I want to try and do, actually, and this might sound a bit highfalutin, is through things like the podcast, but also my day-to-day activity in the business and the people around me, is to help people not be struggling and suffering. Like you talked about this, how this was the big thing for you in the pandemic. It's just I don't want to see that. And if I can have in some small way help like you say about the kind of actual depth to this, not about likes, but like if I can help one person just edge down the amount of grief they're giving themselves because they've set up a company and it's hard, that's why I'm doing this.
Yes. Yeah. And that's like I say, it's mighty. And I think, the journey is never easy. If being a successful entrepreneur was easy, everyone would be doing it. But I think it's about it's about being prepared for the bumps and the bruises en route, because there will be some regardless. But if you can soften the landing, Dan, what a great proposition it is. Well,
thank you, and thank you for helping. Because listen, all this stuff is just absolute gold, so where would people find out more about you, or where should we direct our listeners today?
I'm not a prolific social media animal, but I am on Instagram. I like Instagram because no one sort of takes a picture and go, "Can't stand you." Right, no one does that, right? So it's a calmer place. It's a nicer environment. So I do like Instagram. I'm at Carl Castledine on there. Same handle on Twitter, and Carl Castledine official on Facebook. I'm just actually starting to develop out some output, but a bit more output. I don't know about you. I mean, so because it's things like this where I don't know if my words matter to people. They're just my experiences, right? And sometimes you can see people going on social media and being a bit preachy. And I don't want to be that person, but if I can help, if people are interested, they can message me on any of those platforms, and I'll try and express some more information and give some more knowledge. No problem.
Yeah, and check out Carl's business, Away Resorts. It's a fantastic looking business. I've not actually visited one of your parks yet, but I would like to.
We need to fix that. It's a cool space. There are some really lovely locations. I would say that, wouldn't I? But they genuinely are cool.
Yeah, do you know what? I'd love to. I mean, I'm hankering for getting out of the house. Actually, before we finish up, I'm just going to ask you one last question, which is what I like to ask people. You talk about entrepreneurs and people getting onto this sort of game, and there are so many kind of gurus out there giving out advice. So what advice should entrepreneurs ignore?
For me, the big one is don't spend all your time looking for a niche. Everyone's looking for a niche, this kind of new market that they can then exploit and become multi-billionaires overnight. Don't worry about that. Actually, I find really big, very highly competitive markets that are run with a huge degree of mediocrity, right? And be brilliant in that space because you've already got a giant customer base that's probably screaming out for high quality experiences or better experiences. And the joy of that is mediocrity exists everywhere. Really, really shoddy, poor experiences exist everywhere. So just whenever you're feeling that sense of frustration in an environment, there's probably an entrepreneur waiting to break out and fix that and make something better about it. So I would say, forget that niche rubbish, go for a big market that's poorly and averagely run and do something in there.
That's great. Well, and what a bombshell to finish our podcast on. I'm going to go and quickly go and look at places that annoy me and try and fix it.
Hey, do you know what? I've loved it, Dan. Thanks so much for your time, mate.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to have you on, and hopefully I'll come and see you at one of your parks very soon.
Looking forward to it. See you soon, buddy.
Bye. If you want to receive the top 5 tidbits, the nuggets, the insights from each episode in your inbox every week, head up to honeyblueupthebusiness.com. Yes, the snappily titled honeyblueupthebusiness.com, and enter your email address. And we're going to get the best bits. We're going to collate them together and we're going to send them to you. So you don't have to write them down when listening to the podcast. Yes, nice and easy. So get up there, enter your email address, get the tips, all good. And I've got to say before I go that this podcast is generously supported by my company, The Tech Department. Thank you, guys. They are indulging me as I'm pursuing this little creative project. If you want to find a company that helps make your technology better so that gets your business better as well, head up to thetechdept.com. So on behalf of everybody here, thanks for listening. See you next time.